You've worked hard, you've tried to change, you've read the books, made the plans, started over more times than you can count. And yet, if you're honest with yourself, certain things haven't moved. The same financial pressure that was there 10 years ago, the same feeling of being close but not quite there, the same version of yourself showing up in situations you swore you'd already left behind. You're not lazy, you're not weak, but something isn't working. And what I'm about to tell you will explain exactly why. Not with motivational language, not with promises, with a law that has been operating in your life since the day you were born, shaping every outcome, reinforcing every pattern, building the reality around you with perfect, indifferent precision. A law that physicists confirmed in a laboratory 100 years ago. A law that the ancient masters encoded thousands of years before that. And a law that once you truly understand it, will make you look back at your entire life and see it completely differently. Stay until the end. Because the most disturbing part of this video is not what scientists discovered. It's what that discovery reveals about the choices your mind has been making without your permission every single day. The experiment is called the double-slit experiment. And if you have never heard of it, prepare yourself, because what I'm about to describe will make you question the ground beneath your feet. Here is the setup. Scientists take a beam of electrons, subatomic particles, the building blocks of all physical matter, and they fire them at a barrier that has two vertical slits cut into it. Behind that barrier is a detector screen that records where the electrons land. Now, if electrons were simply tiny solid balls, like miniature marbles, you would expect them to pass through one slit or the other and create two parallel bands on the screen behind. Simple, logical, predictable. That is not what happened. When no one was watching, the electrons behaved like waves. They spread out, passed through both slits simultaneously, and created what physicists call an interference pattern. Dozens of alternating bands on the screen, like ripples in water colliding with each other. The electrons were not choosing one slit. They were choosing all possible paths at once. They were, in the most literal sense of the word, existing in multiple places simultaneously. Now here is where it gets disturbing. The scientists were confused. They wanted to know which slit the electron was actually passing through, so they set up a detector, a measuring device, to observe the electrons as they traveled through the slits. And the moment they turned on the detector, the moment observation began, the interference pattern vanished completely. The electrons stopped behaving like waves and started behaving like particles, like solid, definite, predictable things, each one passing through one slit or the other, landing in one of two bands, just like a marble would. Knowing which path the electron took changed which path the electron took. The act of observation, the act of a conscious mind paying attention, collapsed an infinite field of possibilities into a single, concrete reality. This is not a metaphor. This is not philosophy. This is a repeatable, verified, measurable physical phenomenon confirmed in laboratories around the world for almost 100 years. John Wheeler, one of the most respected physicists of the 20th century, spent the last decades of his life wrestling with this question. He proposed what he called the participatory universe, the idea that the universe could not have existed in any meaningful sense before conscious observers arrived to collapse it into definite form. He wrote, "No phenomenon is a real phenomenon until it is an observed phenomenon." Think about what that sentence actually means. Reality, physical, tangible, measurable reality, is not real until a mind engages with it. The universe needs observers, not to record what already exists, but to decide what exists. And the scientific community has never fully recovered from the implications. Because if the observer changes what is observed, then consciousness is not just a passenger in the universe. Consciousness is a participant, a co-creator, and that possibility, that your attention is not neutral, that the way you observe your own life actively shapes what your life becomes, is both the most liberating and the most terrifying idea you will ever encounter. Liberating because it means you are not powerless. Terrifying because it means you have never been. What the Kybalion already knew. Now I want to take you back further, much further. Before quantum physics, before Einstein, before Newton, before the scientific revolution. Thousands of years ago, in the mystery schools of ancient Egypt and Greece, there existed a body of knowledge so advanced, so complete, that it encoded the structure of reality in 7 simple principles. This knowledge was considered sacred. It was not shared openly. It was passed from teacher to student in private, under oath, after years of preparation. Because the people who held it understood something that still holds true today. A principle this powerful in the hands of someone who does not understand themselves is dangerous. These principles were eventually preserved in a text called the Kybalion. No one knows exactly when it was first written. The text itself claims to transmit the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, a figure so ancient that some historians believe the name refers not to a single person, but to an entire lineage of master teachers, spanning thousands of years. The Kybalion was published in its modern form in 1908, and even then the authors chose to remain anonymous, identified only as 3 initiates. They believed the world was ready. I will let you decide whether they were right. The very first principle, the foundation on which all the others rest, is called the principle of mentalism. It reads, "The all is mind, the universe is mental." Read that again slowly. Not the mind is powerful, not attitude matters, not think positive thoughts. The all is mind. The Kybalion is not saying that your mind influences reality from the inside, the way a hand pushes a door. It is making a far more radical claim. It is saying that reality itself is mental in nature, that the entire physical universe, every atom, every star, every particle, every force, every event that has ever occurred is an expression of a single universal mind manifesting itself into form. In other words, there is no physical world that exists independently of mind. What we call the physical world is what mind looks like from the inside. Matter is not the foundation of reality. Mind is. Matter is what mind produces when it observes itself. And here is where the ancient wisdom and modern science converge, in a way that should stop every person who encounters it. If reality is fundamentally mental in nature, if the universe is, at its core, mind expressing itself, then the behavior of subatomic particles in the presence of an observer is not a mystery at all. It is exactly what the law predicts. Consciousness doesn't change reality from the outside. Consciousness is the substance of reality. When a mind observes, it is the universe observing itself, and in doing so, collapsing infinite potential into specific, definite form. Werner Heisenberg, one of the architects of quantum mechanics, wrote this: "The atoms or elementary particles themselves are not real. They form a world of potentialities or possibilities rather than one of things or facts." Potentialities. The Kybalion calls this the unmanifest. The infinite field of possible expressions that exists before mind gives them form, the space before creation, the silence before the word. Quantum physics calls it the wave function. Different centuries, different languages, the same truth. And both traditions arrive at the same conclusion. What collapses potential into reality is not force, not time, not randomness. It is observation. It is mind. The part that should disturb you. Now I need to say something that most people teaching this material are afraid to say, because it is easier to talk about the power of your mind as a gift, as a superpower, as a reason to feel hopeful and inspired and ready to write down your goals. That version of this teaching fills stadiums. It sells books. It gets shared on social media with uplifting music playing underneath it. But that is not the Kybalion. The Kybalion does not teach these principles as comfort. It teaches them as laws. And here is the difference between a principle and a law. A principle is something you can choose to apply or ignore, depending on whether it suits you in the moment. A law is something that is operating on you, whether you know about it or not, whether you believe in it or not, whether you consent to it or not. Gravity is a law. You do not need to understand it for it to work. You do not need to believe in it. The moment you step off a ledge, it acts on you with perfect, indifferent precision. The principle of mentalism is the same, and laws do not care about your intentions. Gravity does not ask whether you meant to fall. Fire does not pause because you didn't understand it would burn. And the principle of mentalism does not wait for you to believe in it before it begins shaping your life. It is already running. It has been running your entire life. And for most people, the results are not what they would have chosen. Here is why. The human mind, left untrained, does not observe deliberately. It reacts. It scans for threats. It loops through old memories. It rehearses worst-case scenarios with startling precision and emotional intensity. Neuroscience has confirmed that the brain cannot fully distinguish between a vividly imagined experience and a real one. The same neural circuits activate. The same stress hormones are released. The same body responses occur. Your nervous system treats imagination as rehearsal for reality. Now apply the double-slit experiment to that. Every morning, millions of people wake up and may, before they have even gotten out of bed, begin the process of observation. They observe their anxiety about money. They observe their fear that things will not change. They observe themselves as stuck, as failing, as unworthy, as unlucky. They rehearse these realities with emotional intensity, in vivid detail, with absolute consistency. And the universe, obedient, precise, and completely indifferent to their suffering, collapses exactly what they observe. The pattern repeats. They call it bad luck. They call it their circumstances. They call it the way things are. It is none of those things. It is the first law, operating exactly as described, using an untrained mind as its instrument. And this is the most frightening thing I can tell you. You have been building your current reality with extraordinary precision. Everything you see around you, the patterns that keep returning, the doors that keep closing, the version of yourself that keeps showing up despite your best efforts to change, that is not random. That is not fate. That is the output of a mind that has been left unguarded, collapsing the same field of possibility into the same reality day after day with the reliability of a physical law. Let that land for a moment. The mind as instrument. The Kybalion distinguishes between two kinds of mind. There is the finite mind, what we experience as the individual self, the personal stream of thoughts, emotions, memories, and habits that most people mistake for who they are. The voice in the head that narrates your life, judges your decisions, and feeds you a constant stream of interpretations about what everything means. Most people live entirely inside this voice. They are so immersed in it that they cannot see it from the outside. They identify with every thought it produces, believe every fear it generates, and accept every story it tells about what is possible and what is not. This is what the ancient traditions called sleep, not physical sleep, but the sleep of a mind that does not know it is a mind that has forgotten what it is. And there is the infinite mind, the universal intelligence that is the substance of all things, the field from which all possibility emerges, the source that quantum physicists gesture toward when they describe the wave function before observation collapses it. The Hermetic teaching is that the finite mind is not separate from the infinite mind. It is an expression of it, a localized point, a specific frequency within an infinite spectrum through which the infinite mind becomes conscious of itself. You are not a small mind inside a large universe. You are the universe. generating a localized center of awareness and using that center to experience itself from the inside. And here is what that means in practice. Your individual mind is not a small, isolated thing operating inside a much larger reality. It is an opening, a channel, a point of contact between the unmanifest field of infinite possibility and the manifest world of physical experience. The power does not come from you, it flows through you, but the shape it takes, the specific reality it collapses into form, is determined by what your mind consistently holds, what it believes, what it expects, what it fears, what it rehearses. This is what makes mental training not a spiritual luxury, but a survival skill. An untrained mind channels the infinite in all directions at once, pulled by every fear, every past wound, every conditioned belief absorbed in childhood, every lie that was told with enough emotional force to be accepted as truth. The result is a life that feels chaotic, reactive, as if things are happening to you rather than being created by you. A trained mind learns to hold a direction, to observe deliberately, to choose with consistency what wave function it will collapse, not through rigid control, not through obsessive visualization or forced positivity, through understanding, through the kind of deep, settled knowing that the Hermeticists called gnosis, direct experiential comprehension of a law that goes so far beyond intellectual understanding that it permanently alters the way you see yourself and the world. Once you truly understand that you are not separate from the universe, that you are the point at which the universe observes and defines itself, the way you relate to your own mind changes forever. You stop treating thoughts as things that happen to you. You start treating them as acts of creation. The practical dimension. So what does this actually mean in the daily structure of a life? The Kybalion does not leave this abstract. It teaches what the masters called the art of mental alchemy, the deliberate transmutation of mental states from lower to higher, from reactive to creative, from unconscious to intentional. This is not done through affirmations, not through vision boards, not through any technique that places the power in a ritual rather than in understanding, because a ritual performed by an unexamined mind is just decoration on top of the same old observation. The surface changes, the deep pattern does not. True mental alchemy begins further down. It begins with the willingness to look, clearly, honestly, without flinching, at what your unguarded mind has been observing, not what you want to believe it has been doing, not the story you tell people about how positive you've been trying to stay. What has it actually been rehearsing in the moments between tasks, in the 3 minutes before you fall asleep, in the background frequency that runs underneath every decision you make? Because that is the observation that is collapsing your reality, not the deliberate 10-minute visualization you do in the morning, the unconscious, habitual, emotionally charged observation that runs for 16 hours a day without your supervision. Every time you catch yourself rehearsing a fear, you are in the act of observing. You are collapsing a wave function. The question is whether you are doing so deliberately or by default. Every time you return again and again to an image of your life as you intend it to be, not wishing, not fantasizing, but knowing with the calm certainty of someone who understands the law, you are participating in the collapse of a different possibility. The universe does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you observe as real. This is the precision of the law, and it is also why most attempts at self-improvement ultimately fail. Because beneath the technique, the deeper observation, the one embedded in the nervous system shaped by years of unexamined experience, is still running. The new habit sits on top of the old observation like a fresh coat of paint on a rotting wall, and eventually the rot wins. Mental mastery is not about adding better habits on top of an unexamined foundation. It is about going down into the foundation, looking at what is actually there and changing the observation at the source. That is where the law operates. That is where reality is actually being built. And that is why the Kybalion begins not with techniques, but with a principle. Because a person who truly understands the principle doesn't need to be told what to do. They already know. The understanding itself is the transformation. The skeptic's objection. Before I close, I want to address the objection forming in the mind of every rational, skeptical person watching this. If that is you, good. Hold on to that skepticism. It is a sign your mind is working. The objection goes something like this. You can't draw a straight line from quantum physics to human consciousness. Electrons are not people. Wave function collapse happens at the subatomic level, not at the level of human decisions and daily life. You are taking a metaphor and treating it as a mechanism. It is a fair objection, and I want to give it the respect it deserves. The Kybalion does not require you to believe that your thoughts are literally collapsing electrons. It requires something simpler, and in some ways more difficult to accept. That mind is the most fundamental reality there is. That matter is downstream of consciousness, not upstream of it, and that the relationship between your inner world, your habitual observations, your expectations, your deep-seated beliefs, and your outer world is not metaphorical. It is causal. You do not need quantum physics to confirm this. Look at someone you know who has spent years convinced that they are unlucky, who rehearses daily with emotional precision all the evidence that the world is against them. Are they unlucky? Or have they been the most diligent practitioner of the principle of mentalism you have ever met, collapsing with extraordinary consistency the exact reality they most feared? Now look at someone who seems to move through the world differently, not someone with more talent or more favorable circumstances, someone who simply expects things to work out, who holds their direction without obsession, but with a settled, quiet certainty. Things open for them in ways that are difficult to explain rationally. Is it luck, or is it the law operating on a mind that has been pointed, consciously or not, in a consistent direction? The Kybalion does not ask you to take this on faith. It asks you to test it, not as a believer, as an experimenter. 3,000 years ago, the Hermeticists encoded a truth that the most advanced science in human history has now confirmed from a completely different direction. The universe is mental. Consciousness is not a passenger, it is the mechanism. And your mind, right now in this moment, is not reflecting reality. It is building it. The only question that has ever mattered is what it has been building while you were asleep, and what you will choose to build now that you are awake. The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding. The Kybalion. The second law reveals why some minds build and others destroy. Subscribe. It's the next video.